it's Jamie from Play to Learn Preschool. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. As promised, yesterday I shared with you some of my favorite book finds from the NAEYC, the NAEYC Annual Conference that we came home from after being there last week, Wednesday through Saturday. And I said that I would also share with you today some of my biggest takeaways, or my smallest takeaways, I guess. As I was kind of making the list to share with you, I realized that they're tiny little nuggets of inspiration and wisdom that I want to share with you because they really stuck with me after spending 3.5 days being inspired by other early childhood educators. So first I have to give you a little background story, and then I'll tell you the nuggets of inspiration that I gleaned from the annual conference. Hi guys, thanks for joining me. Okay, so first I have to tell you that as a little girl, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was born in '77, and we lived there until like 95, 97 when I went to college. So I'm a Pittsburgh girl at heart, and when I was little, we had not very many choices of television, but my mom used to let me watch 2 shows every day while she was putting my baby sister down for her nap, because I was about like 3 years old, preschool age, and I had a 1-year-old sister. Hi, Erin. She watches sometimes. And so my mom would always let me watch TV every afternoon while she was putting my sister down for a nap, and I could watch 1 hour of Sesame Street and a half an hour of Mr. Rogers. Every day, as long as I can remember. I was even in half-day kindergarten. That's the thing back in 1982. And in half-day kindergarten, you didn't go until like after lunch. And so I'd watch it in the mornings. Every day, I watched Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Every single day. And then, when I became a mom, to my youngest daughter, we, in the afternoons after preschool, when she was still here with me, we would go upstairs, and every day we'd eat our lunch together, and then she was a little bit too old for a nap, or she'd given up her nap, so we'd have quiet time, and I would let her watch 2 episodes of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which of course is based on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I have a deep, long love for Fred Rogers, for the work that he did first as a child, and then for the amazing things that he taught my own children, especially my youngest daughter, through Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood more recently. And now as an educator in the last few years, I've really spent a lot of time reading about Fred Rogers' philosophy of early childhood education, about his beliefs, about his just the way that he wanted to reach young children. And this summer, I got to see the Fred Rogers documentary. My poor friends went with me to see this movie in the movie theater, and I told them I was a huge Fred Rogers fan, so I feel like they were fair warned. But I was so very moved by the Fred Rogers documentary. I started crying like 20 minutes into the documentary, and I did not stop crying until long after they drove me home. My husband, I came home and he's like, "How was the movie?" I was like, Fred, he just like touches my heart. He pulls at my heartstrings. Fred Rogers had it all right all along from 1967 until he passed in 2003. He knew exactly what he was doing. So all of that backstory to tell you that the opening plenary session at the NAEYC Annual Conference this year was a panel of experts all talking about Fred Rogers. And the panel included Mrs. Rogers herself, Joanne Rogers, who is like the most adorable 90-year-old woman you've ever seen in your whole life. They had the whole stage set up like the set of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and she walks out carrying her purse, sits down, has the handbag on her arm. I mean, I burst into tears. My poor friends. I don't actually know how I still have friends because I think they're all like, Jamie is totally cuckoo. And they just talked about this process. It was Mrs. Rogers, another gentleman's name escapes me, who worked really closely with Fred Rogers on the set of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on the production set. Yo-Yo Ma's son, Nicholas Ma, who produced the documentary. A gentleman by the name of June Lee, who has his doctorate of education from Harvard and worked as the director, I believe I'm getting all of this right, of the Fred Rogers Institute for a number of years. And they were all just talking about what would Fred Rogers do, or like, what can we take from Fred Rogers? And of course, I was so moved by it. So what I thought I'd do is I jotted down what I think are my 5 biggest takeaways from both that opening session. I went to 2 sessions that were sponsored by the Fred Rogers Institute because I just can't get enough, and nobody went with me to those. I'm trying to think. Nope, I think that Gemma deserted me, and my other friends at the conference were like, you are on your own, you cuckoo. It's so interesting to me. We can talk about it more in another video, but it's just so interesting to me about how much of him I've carried with me as I plan on how I'm becoming a teacher. It's just really, I don't know. It really gets me. Betsy, the whole thing, it just gets to me. Okay, so what I thought I would do is share. I promise I won't cry. I think I won't cry because I don't have any clips from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood to share with you. So what I thought I would do is share the 5 key takeaways that I kind of gleaned from the conference. Number 1, Fred Rogers fundamentally believed that we need to value children for who they are today, and not for what or who they will become when they grow up. Fred Rogers believed that children have innate worth just by being just by being children, and that we don't need to think about, oh, what's he going to be when he grows up, or if we invest in him now, how much of a return on investment will we get in terms of our economy in the future. Fred Rogers believed that children are innately valuable by virtue of being human beings. Right? And so I think that's so important for us to remember, because sometimes we get caught up like, are they going to be ready for kindergarten, and are they going to be, a good student in the future? And Fred would say, stop. These children are valuable and important and essential because just by being human, by their value and their virtue of being themselves. And he would say the same thing about us, which would make me cry. Okay. The second thing that I wanted to share with you was a quote that I think June Lee read during one of the sessions I went to about what would Fred Rogers do. And the quote was, I might be paraphrasing it because I jotted it down in notes. The alphabet matters, but what really matters is if you will use the alphabet as a declaration of war or a description of the sunset. So what he's saying is, yes, it is important for us to teach children letters and numbers, etc. But what is more important is, what kind of a person are they going to become? How are they going to use those pieces of information? How will they use those skills? And in preschool, sometimes we get caught up in thinking they need to know all XYZ things. They can't leave. They got to know all the things. We have to teach all the things. But we don't have to teach all the things if we do not have a caring classroom community. If we have not taught children to describe a sunset, to care for each other, to be a valuable part of the community, to, you know what I mean? Like, use the alphabet for good and learn to kind of see all those other important things about social emotional skills and friendship and taking care of each other. So Fred would say that the goal of preschool education, I hope he would say this, I think this is what I wrote down. I apologize if I misstate any of this. This is my takeaways, nothing written in, nothing officially produced by Fred. These are Jamie White's takeaways. The goal is to create confident, competent, caring individuals. Competent, confident, caring human beings, right? So the alphabet is important, but what's more important is what they do with that knowledge. I know. I'm not going to cry because I don't see any video clips or hear Fred in my ear at the moment, but I tell you what, it does not take long for me to watch him and hear those things and hear him say, you're important just for being you. It goes right to the core of what I think is important for preschool education. Okay, number 3, deep and simple is far more essential than shallow and complex. So when we're thinking about our lesson plans and we're thinking about how we spend our time with our preschoolers each day, Fred would say, the most essential thing is what you do that's deep and simple, not shallow and complex. So what do we do deeply and simply every day in our classroom? How do we take care of each other? How do we make a relationship with each other? That is more essential than all these other complex things that we can do very shallowly. So good. He's so smart. So smart. He's like a child development genius, a human genius. Yes. The genius of Fred Rogers. All right. And so then he would say to us, what do we do every day that's deep and simple in our work? What are we doing every day? The simple things that are the most meaningful and most deep things. What do we do every day that's deep and simple in our work every day with children? Okay. Fred Rogers wrote a number of books, a bunch of them that I read in college, like in the 90s, and then some that I need to re-pick up and read again through a new lens, as you learn more and do more. It has different meaning. That's just how life goes. So Fred wrote a book in 1983 called The Fundamentals for School Readiness, and which I think is interesting because it was a popular book in 1983, and clearly a lot of my teachers in 1983, as in like kindergarten, first grade, probably had read it or heard about it. And so these are the 6 fundamentals for school readiness, according to Fred Rogers in 1983. Can you guess what they are? What do you think Fred thought was important for school readiness in 1983? I'm going to argue that they're the same things that we need for school readiness in 2018 or 19, but okay. So here are the things he said were fundamental for school readiness: self-worth, trust, curiosity, capacity to listen and look carefully, capacity to play. Did I say curiosity? Self-worth, trust, curiosity, capacity to look and listen carefully, capacity to play, and solitude. Can kids be okay alone? Solitude. What if those were the 6 things that we were trying to teach in pre-K to get our kids ready for kindergarten? Capacity to look and listen carefully, capacity to play, self-worth, trust, curiosity, solitude. That would make a much easier manual, wouldn't it, for a pre-K teacher? No problem, there's only 6 things you need to teach. I need to reread that book. I don't think I still have a copy. I think I need to order that one. Fred Rogers, Essentials for School Readiness, Fundamentals for School Readiness. All right, and then last, the thing that every speaker who was speaking on behalf of Fred Rogers and the Fred Rogers Institute and his wife, every single thing kept coming back to this same point that I think is the most important takeaway. They kept saying, people ask in 2018, what would Fred Rogers do? In XYZ, what would he do about technology? What would Fred Rogers do about school shootings? What would Fred Rogers do about bullying? What would Fred Rogers do about the fact that first grade has become the new kindergarten and that we're trying to make kindergarten skills applicable to pre-K students? What would Fred Rogers do? And every person on that panel in a number of different situations, in the opening session and in some of the sessions that I attended, said, the question is not, what would Fred Rogers do? The question is, what are you going to do? Cue the tears from me, because they're like, Fred has been preparing you and me and all of us for this question. He can't answer that question for us anymore. He's saying to you, what are you going to do? How are you going to affect change? How are you going to make these deep, important connections with children? How are we going to teach kids to have self-worth and trust and capacity to look and listen carefully, capacity to play? How are we going to do it, you and me, here today? Fred's not here to do it for us. And as much as we can glean information and inspiration from him, the real work is with you and me in our classrooms every day. And so I was so moved and so touched by the whole conference, specifically by every session I went to, revolving around that topic of what would Fred do. And I just hope that some of the inspiration that I gleaned there from the conference, I'm able to share with you too. So thank you guys for joining me. I'm on that same horizontal camera. I was just trying to keep it the same, and I can't see the comments. So I'm going to come back and read them, and I will try to respond. In the meantime, I hope you have fun playing and learning with your kids. If you're in the U.S., happy Thanksgiving. I won't be on the rest of this week. We're going to, school's closed for us, and I'm going to spend some time with my family, but we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.